No way you're charging her that, Nolan Brooks said, stepping between the wide-eyed woman and the greasy mechanic who had just quoted her nearly double the cost of the repair. The woman blinked, clearly caught off guard. I'm sorry, what? Nolan turned slightly toward her, his jaw tight. They're trying to scam you. That part doesn't cost more than $200, labor included. She doesn't seem to be complaining, the mechanic muttered, arms crossed, clearly annoyed. Nolan shook his head. She doesn't know cars. You saw her walk in alone, in heels, and figured she wouldn't question the price. I'm guessing that's not the first time you've pulled that trick either. The mechanic rolled his eyes, muttered something under his breath, and stomped back toward the garage. The woman, tall, elegant, with oversized sunglasses and a soft gray coat that looked like it cost more than Nolan's entire wardrobe, stared at him. Thank you, she said eventually. Her voice was calm, but there was something in her eyes. Surprise, curiosity. No problem. Nolan wiped his hands on his jeans. Sorry if I crossed a line, but I've seen guys like him do that too many times. You didn't look like you knew much about alternators. I don't, she admitted, lips twitching. Honestly, I didn't even know I needed one. He smiled, and for the first time since she walked into the lot, she noticed the tired lines around his eyes, the oil on his fingers, the way his T-shirt clung to his lean frame. He looked like someone who worked hard, someone real. I'm Nolan, he said, holding out a hand. She hesitated for just a second before taking it. Maribel West. Well, Maribel West, he said, you just avoided getting robbed blind. I can take a look at your car if you want. I'm not a mechanic anymore, but I still know my way around an engine. You used to be a mechanic. Yeah, he said, glancing toward the small boy kicking a soccer ball by the edge of the lot. Had to stop when my son was born, needed a steadier job. I work deliveries now. Maribel followed his gaze. The boy looked about 6 or 7 with Nolan's dark hair and big brown eyes. That's your son, she asked. Yeah, Weston, he's my whole world. Something about the way he said it made her chest squeeze. Nolan crouched beside her car, popped the hood, and started checking connections. Maribel leaned against the fender, crossing her arms. You didn't have to do that, you know, she said softly. He looked up from the engine. Do what? Step in, help me. You don't know me. No, he said simply. But I know what it's like to be taken advantage of, and I hate watching decent people get played. I could have handled it. He gave her a lopsided grin. I'm sure you could have, but just in case it didn't hurt to step in. Maribel studied him. He didn't know who she was. Didn't recognize her from magazine covers or Forbes lists. Didn't know that she was the CEO of one of the largest tech investment firms in the country. That she was worth billions. That the car she was driving, a beat-up Camry, was borrowed from her assistant because she didn't want to attract attention in the small town she was visiting for a charity board meeting. So, she said, watching him close the hood. What do I owe you? Nothing, he said, straightening. You don't owe me anything. Just be careful next time. She tilted her head. You're really not going to let me pay you. I'm not a mechanic, remember? Just a dad who doesn't like seeing people get cheated. Nolan turned and called out, Weston. Time to go, buddy. The boy ran over, still holding the soccer ball. Dad, I almost scored a goal. Nolan tousled his hair. You're getting better, champ. Maribel knelt to Weston's level. How old are you? 7, he said proudly. My dad taught me how to kick goals. He's the best goalie. Maribel's heart did something strange. She stood quickly. Well, thank you again, Nolan and Weston. You ever need real help with your car, Nolan said, go to Hank's down on 5th. He's honest. Won't try to rob you. I'll remember that. As she got into her car, Maribel's fingers hovered over her phone. She could have had her assistant wire $10,000 to Nolan within minutes. But something stopped her. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't chasing her money. He was just good, and she hadn't met good in a long time. She drove off slowly, watching him in the rearview mirror, one hand on his son's shoulder as they walked toward a beat-up red pickup truck. The next day, she walked into the local grocery store, hoping to grab a coffee before her meeting, and there he was again, Nolan, arguing with the cashier over the price of eggs. They were marked down, he said. That sign said 2 for $5, now you're charging me $4.50 each, the cashier rolled her eyes. That sign was from last week. Nolan sighed, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill and handed it over. Hey, Maribel said, stepping forward. Put it on mine, he turned, surprised. Maribel, she smiled. You helped me yesterday, let me return the favor. Pretty sure eggs don't cost $800 in labor, he teased. Maybe I'm just a terrible tipper. He glanced at her, then handed the eggs back to the cashier. Okay, deal. But then you have to have coffee with me, her eyebrows lifted. Is that part of the return policy? Absolutely, he said. Non-negotiable. They sat outside with 2 paper cups and a shared muffin. Weston was at school and Nolan looked more relaxed in the daylight. So what brings you to this dusty town? He asked. Charity work, she said vaguely. I sit on a few boards, he nodded. You always dress like that for charity work. She glanced down at her beige coat. Is this bad? No, it's just. You look like you belong somewhere way fancier than here, she smiled. Maybe I don't know where I belong, he studied her carefully. Well, you're welcome here. Something in his voice made her chest ache. She hadn't expected any of this, not the spark, not the comfort. And definitely not the feeling that she was already falling in love with a man who had no idea who she was, but she was. And that terrified her and thrilled her all at once. I didn't take you for someone who liked diner pancakes, Nolan said, watching Maribel slide into the booth across from him, sunlight catching on the rim of her sunglasses as she pushed them up onto her head. She glanced at the laminated menu with a soft laugh. I don't think I've had diner pancakes since college, but I'm always open to surprises. He leaned back, arms folded, letting her words hang there for a beat. The waitress dropped off 2 mugs of burnt coffee without asking, and he wrapped his hands around his like he wasn't sure what to make of her today. You don't seem like someone who gets surprised often, he said. I don't. But yesterday surprised me. Nolan looked out the window, where Weston was crouched by the sidewalk, focused on arranging pebbles into some kind of pattern. He wanted to come, said the pancakes here are better than mine. I'm trying not to take it personally. You cook 3 times a day, he said. Unless I'm on a night shift, then it's cereal and whatever I've prepped ahead, efficient, necessary. She watched him for a moment, then rested her elbows on the table. Can I ask you something? You can try. Why haven't you left this town? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I did, once, thought the world would make more sense somewhere else. It didn't, came back for Weston. My sister helps out when she can, but I needed to be here. He's got roots now. Maribel tilted her head. And what about your roots? I don't think mine ever took, he said. I grew up a couple towns over, bounced around, this place just stuck because of him. The waitress returned with 2 plates piled high with pancakes. Nolan started cutting into his like it was muscle memory, but Maribel just stared at hers. Don't like syrup? He asked. I'm trying to remember the last time I ate carbs before noon. Must have been a long time ago if you're looking at those like they're a crime scene. She picked up her fork and took a bite. Okay, that's actually criminally good. Told you, he said, grinning. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the kind that didn't feel awkward. Maribel had spent years navigating high-powered meetings and cold boardrooms where silence meant dominance or disinterest. This was different. This was warm. Real. Do you ever wish things had gone differently? She asked eventually. He didn't need clarification. Sometimes, but then I think about what I'd have missed. I've got a kid who thinks I'm a superhero. That kind of perspective makes it hard to stay bitter. She nodded slowly. That's rare. I don't have the luxury of being miserable. He watches everything I do. If I fall apart, he learns that's what you do when life gets hard. I think that's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years. He looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. What kind of people have you been listening to? She hesitated, then looked away. People who think saying nothing is a sign of strength. Sounds lonely. It is. He didn't push. She appreciated it more than she could say. After breakfast, they stepped outside. Weston was still absorbed in the sidewalk, now adding twigs to his creation. You ever build anything like that when you were a kid? Nolan asked. I didn't really have time to play, or space. My parents were focused. We moved a lot. Military, money, he raised an eyebrow. That's a new one. My father was a banker. My mother ran a portfolio so aggressive it made headlines. I grew up in boardrooms, learned to calculate compound interest before I learned to ride a bike. Nolan whistled low. That explains the coat. I'll take that as a compliment, you should. It's not a bad thing to come from that world, just different, she glanced at him. And this doesn't scare you off, he chuckled. You think I scare easy. I think most men would be intimidated. I'm not most men. She opened her mouth to reply, but Weston ran up before she could. Look, he said, holding out his twig and rock masterpiece. It's a dragon, Maribel crouched, inspecting it with care. He has wings and everything. Dad says dragons are strong, but they have soft bellies. That's why knights aim there. She looked up at Nolan, something unreadable in her eyes. Is that true? Depends on the dragon, he said. Some don't let anyone close enough to find out. The three of them walked together to the parking lot. Weston skipped ahead, humming, while Nolan slowed his pace beside her. I should get going, she said. Big important board thing, something like that. He reached into his back pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. She opened it to find a hand-drawn map and a name written in block letters. Cedar Ridge, 5 p.m. What is this? Best view in town, bring a jacket. It gets cold. She looked at him and saw something flicker in his gaze, not arrogance, not expectation, just the quiet confidence of someone who wasn't afraid to let her choose. I'll think about it. Do more than think. She didn't answer, but he didn't seem to need her to. He just nodded and walked back to his truck, calling Weston over. Maribel stood there a moment longer, holding the map in her hand, feeling the weight of it like it was more than paper. Like it was a door, a choice, and for the first time in years she was tempted to walk through it. Maribel had never driven up a gravel road so slowly in her life. The path to Cedar Ridge narrowed the higher she climbed, winding through dense evergreens that turned golden near the tips under the late afternoon sun. Her assistant's borrowed sedan groaned in protest, but she coaxed it forward, one cautious turn at a time. At the top, the trees opened into a rocky clearing with a view that stole her breath. The town stretched far below in miniature rows of brick buildings, a silver ribbon of river, and beyond that, the dusky outline of hills rolling into the horizon. Nolan was already there. He stood near the edge, one foot propped on a boulder, arms crossed as the wind pulled at the edges of his flannel shirt. The sky behind him was streaked with amber and rose, casting shadows across his face and giving him the look of someone carved straight from the land. I was starting to think the pancakes scared you off, he said, not turning around. They were the only reason I came, she replied. He looked over his shoulder then, his eyes catching on hers like a magnet. You didn't strike me as someone who'd follow directions drawn on the back of a receipt. I'm not, she said, stepping out of the car. But today I wanted to be. He nodded, then gestured to a blanket already laid out near the edge. A thermos and 2 enamel mugs sat beside it. I figured if I invited you up here, I should at least bring something to make it worth your time. She sat down slowly, brushing wind-blown strands of hair from her face. What is it? Cider. Made it myself. Apple season's almost over, had to use what was left. She took a sip. The cider was warm, spiced, and not even close to perfect, which somehow made it better. Most people bring wine to impress someone, she said. I'm not most people, he replied. Besides, I didn't think you'd be impressed by wine. Why not? Because you've probably tasted bottles worth more than my truck. She let out a quiet sound of amusement. You're not wrong. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip closer to the tree line. Do you ever wonder what you'd be doing if Weston hadn't come along? She asked. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, thoughtful. Sometimes, but it's more like wondering about a movie I never saw, doesn't feel real. He's been with me so long, I can't imagine life without him. But don't you ever want something more, outside of being a dad? I used to, had plans. Saved up to open my own auto shop, actually. Leased the space and everything. What happened? The week before opening, my sister got into a wreck, broke both legs. She was supposed to help me watch him. Weston was just 2 at the time. I had to give up the lease. Couldn't afford both the shop and daycare, and she needed help. Maribel didn't speak. She watched the way his jaw shifted slightly, the way he picked at a loose thread on the blanket. You're not bitter? I was, he admitted. For a while, but then Weston started talking and laughing. And calling me his best friend. That kind of thing rewires your soul. She exhaled, slow and quiet. You make it sound easy. It's not. But it's mine, that counts for something. They both turned their heads when a bird lifted off from a nearby branch, wings cutting through the last of the light. "You haven't told me much about you," he said. "Besides charity boards and expensive coats," she hesitated. "There's not much to tell." He raised an eyebrow. She looked out over the ridge. "I took over my first startup when I was 24, sold it 2 years later. Moved the money into other ventures. Now I run a firm that backs innovation in clean tech and AI. I sit on a few boards, yes, but I also make decisions that affect thousands of jobs. Most of the time, I'm in a glass tower surrounded by people who smile when I walk in and whisper when I leave." He blinked. "So you're not just rich, you're the kind of rich that makes the news." "I don't like the word rich, it's too simple." "Then what should I call it?" "Calculated." "Exhausting, lonely," she looked at him. "Sometimes." "Why'd you come here?" he asked after a pause. "I needed quiet and space to think. One of the nonprofits I fund had a board retreat nearby. I thought I could sneak in and out without anyone noticing. And then you ended up in a dusty parking lot arguing about alternators. Not exactly the quiet I had in mind," he smiled faintly, "but maybe the kind you needed." She tucked her knees closer to her chest. "What would you do if you had no limits, no bills, no responsibilities? Buy back that garage, maybe fix up old muscle cars, teach Weston how to rebuild an engine piece by piece." "That's it," he turned toward her. "What else is there?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words didn't come. Because for the first time in a long time she wasn't sure, he shifted slightly, brushing a pine needle off her coat. "You look different up here," he said. "How so?" "Less polished, more real." Maribel laughed once under her breath. "I didn't realize I wasn't real before." "You were. Just armored. I had to be. And now," she met his gaze, "now I'm wondering what happens if I lower the armor." "Then maybe," he said, voice rougher now, "you'll find someone worth lowering it for." The wind caught her hair again, curling it around her face, and she didn't move to fix it. She leaned in slightly, not enough to close the distance, just enough to let him know she could, and he didn't move away. They stayed there until the sun dropped completely, the sky deepening into indigo. When the first star appeared, she glanced at him. "Do you believe in fate, Nolan?" "I believe some things don't happen by accident." She stood then, brushing off her coat. "Neither do I." He walked her to her car, hands in his pockets, and waited until she turned the engine over. As she drove away, she glanced in the mirror. He was still standing there, framed by trees and fading light, like something out of a dream she hadn't realized she'd needed to remember. And this time, she didn't look away. The fundraiser was held at the historic Langford estate, a sprawling stone manor perched on the edge of a vineyard just outside town. Maribel stepped out of the car in a tailored navy jumpsuit, her hair swept into a low twist, and handed the keys to the valet with a nod. The estate shimmered under fairy lights and chandeliers strung from the trees, the air filled with the scent of roses and aged oak. This was her world. And tonight, she hated it. She moved through the crowd of board members, investors, and local politicians with a practiced ease, smiling, nodding, exchanging brief, strategic pleasantries. But her mind wasn't in it. Every conversation sounded hollow. Every compliment felt rehearsed. She hadn't seen Nolan since Cedar Ridge. That had been 4 days ago. She hadn't called, she hadn't gone back. But she hadn't stopped thinking about him either. "Maribel," a woman said, approaching with a flute of champagne and a knowing tilt of her head, "you've been hard to pin down this week." "Where have you been hiding?" Maribel accepted the glass. "I've been thinking. The woman laughed. "That's not like you. You're usually 3 steps ahead of the rest of us." "Maybe I needed to slow down," the woman blinked. "Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine, Carla. Just reevaluating some things." Carla drifted away a moment later, leaving Maribel standing at the edge of the terrace, staring out over the vineyard. Her fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. Nolan would have hated this place. He would have noticed the waste, the excess. The way people complimented each other's causes, then checked their watches. She took a breath and set the glass down, untouched. A few minutes later, she slipped through a side corridor, past the caterers prepping behind the scenes, and out into the back garden. The air was cooler here, quieter. She pulled her phone from her clutch, thumb hovering over the screen. She hadn't told him who she was. She hadn't told him anything, really. But if she was going to fix this, if there was even a chance she hadn't already ruined it, then she had to start with the truth. Her finger tapped the screen. Then stopped. She didn't want to tell him over a message. She looked down at her shoes' heels, impractical for anything but standing still, and kicked them off. 20 minutes later, barefoot, she reached the edge of town and flagged down a cab. "Can you take me to the corner of Ash and Riverbend?" The driver gave her a look in the mirror. "You sure? That's the edge of the industrial park." "I'm sure." The cab pulled up outside a row of old buildings converted into apartments. She climbed out, shoes in hand, and walked up to the second-floor unit she remembered from the map Nolan had drawn. A porch light buzzed overhead, flickering slightly. She knocked. A full minute passed, then the door opened. Nolan stood there, barefoot in jeans and a faded t-shirt, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. He looked like he'd just finished washing dishes, or maybe he hadn't started. His expression froze when he saw her. "Maribel, I should have come sooner," she said. He looked behind him, then stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, no, I don't know." He folded his arms. "You disappeared. I know, and now you show up on my doorstep barefoot, looking like you walked out of a gala." She gave a small, tired laugh. "I left a gala, well, a fundraiser. I was supposed to give a speech. Let me guess. You vanished before they handed you the mic." "I couldn't do it." "Why?" "Because I couldn't stand there and talk about purpose and community while pretending this week didn't change me." He didn't say anything. "I came here to hide," she said. "That's what I told myself. I didn't want anyone to recognize me. I didn't want to be her." He tilted his head. "Maribel West," she said softly. "The investor, the one who's been on magazine covers, the one who owns 3 companies and sits on 8 boards. The one who's worth more than some small countries." His jaw didn't drop. He didn't flinch. He just blinked once, steady. "I figured," he said, her breath caught. "You did. I'm good at reading people. The borrowed car, the way you dodged questions, the way you looked like you were holding your breath every time someone tried to get close, it didn't take a genius." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was waiting to see if you'd tell me." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't want you to think I was lying." "You weren't," he said. "You were protecting something. I didn't want to be her around you. And who were you? I don't know yet. But with you, I felt like I could figure it out." He looked at her for a long time, then opened the door. There was a soft thump from inside, followed by Weston's voice calling for his dad. "I'll be right there," Nolan called back. He turned back to her. "Come in, but only if you're not going to run again." "I'm not." Inside, Weston was curled up on the couch, a book open on his lap. "Hey," he said when he saw her. "You're back," Maribel smiled. "I missed your dragons," he beamed. They stayed for dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, simple, warm, real. After Weston went to bed, Maribel sat on the couch while Nolan cleared the table. She watched him move, comfortable in his space, and felt something inside her settle. He came back from the kitchen and sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "But I want to find out. With me, if you'll have me." He reached over, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You're not the woman I expected to fall for," he said. "But I'm not sorry I did." Her breath caught, and then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was steady, sure. Like the kind of thing that had been building for days, waiting for the right moment. When they pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his. "I don't care about boardrooms or bank accounts," he said. "I care about you. And I care about you," she whispered. "More than I ever expected to." Weeks later, she bought the lease to the old auto shop Nolan had once dreamed of owning. She handed him the keys in the middle of a dirt lot, grinning like a teenager. "You're giving me a building. I'm giving you your dream." He stared at her for a long moment. "You're unbelievable." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "That's what you said about the pancakes." They built the shop together, weekends full of paint, sweat, and laughter. Weston picked out the colors. And months after that, under a canopy of fairy lights not unlike the ones she'd once stood beneath at the estate, Nolan asked her to marry him with Weston tucked under one arm and a ring in the other. She said yes, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And hers. And finally, she had everything she hadn't known she was looking for. The scent of engine grease and fresh paint lingered in the air as Nolan wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back to admire the glossy black Camaro gleaming under the overhead lights. Every inch of the car had been restored by his own hands, except for the chrome trim, which Weston had insisted on polishing himself with the fierce determination of a boy who wanted to be just like his dad. "You're going to have to name her," Maribel said from the doorway, her voice echoing slightly against the high ceilings of the newly opened shop. Nolan turned, grinning as she crossed the concrete floor in jeans and a white button-down shirt she'd rolled at the sleeves. "You name ships, not cars. She looks like she could sail," she countered, circling the Camaro like a judge at a car show. "Besides, it's practically tradition. You rebuilt her from scratch. She deserves an identity." He leaned against the workbench. "Thought I already had my hands full with one brilliant woman. Flattery isn't going to get you out of naming her." He reached back and pulled her close, his hands settling at her hips. "Fine, I'll think about it." Her smile softened as she glanced around the garage. The walls were lined with tools neatly arranged on pegboards, the open bay doors revealing a view of the tree-lined road outside. The place had come together faster than either of them expected, thanks to a crew of local contractors Nolan had worked with in the past. The sign out front, Brooks and Son Auto, had been Weston's idea. "He's going to be proud," she said, nodding toward the front office, where Weston was doing homework at a small desk they'd tucked into the corner. "He already is," Nolan replied. "He tells people his dad owns the coolest garage in the state. He's not wrong. But he also thinks grilled cheese is a food group, so his judgment's a little suspect." Maribel laughed, then leaned into him, her hands sliding under the hem of his shirt to rest against warm skin. "You know, you could take the rest of the afternoon off." "Tempting," he said, lowering his voice as his lips brushed her temple. "But I've got 2 oil changes and a brake inspection before 5. She stepped back, mock sighing. "Fine. Be responsible." He watched her walk toward Weston, her stride confident, her presence so natural in the space it was hard to remember a time when she wasn't part of it. She knelt beside the boy, said something that made him laugh, then ruffled his hair before heading into the office to take a call. As Nolan turned back to the Camaro, he thought about the last few weeks. After the proposal, things had moved quickly but not recklessly. Maribel had started working remotely part of the month, splitting her time between the city and the small town, where she now felt more grounded than anywhere else. She'd already sold one of her 3 apartments and passed the reins of her firm's day-to-day operations to her second-in-command. For the first time in years, she'd stopped counting hours and started counting moments. They'd found a house together, a craftsman-style place with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for Weston to kick soccer balls and build dragons out of sticks. Nolan's sister dropped by most mornings to help with the school run, and on the nights Maribel had to fly out for meetings, Weston stayed with her, proudly declaring he had 2 moms now. That night, they celebrated the shop's official opening with a community barbecue in the lot. Tables were lined with homemade pies, pulled pork, and baked beans. Weston wore a tool belt 2 sizes too big and gave tours of the garage to anyone who'd listen. Nolan manned the grill. Maribel organized games for the kids, barefoot in the grass, her phone forgotten in her purse. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long golden shadows over the crowd, Nolan found her near the edge of the lot, barefoot again, watching Weston chase fireflies with the other children. "You always end up losing the shoes," he said, stepping beside her. "They get in the way," she said gently. "Some things feel better without them." He slid his hand into hers, fingers lacing easily. "You know, I used to think my life was set. That I'd figured out what I could have and what I couldn't. And now, I'm starting to believe I can have the dream and the girl." She looked up at him. "I was never the dream." He pulled her close. "You're the whole damn story." She kissed him, right there in front of the town and the barbecue and a dozen nosy neighbors who would definitely be talking about it tomorrow. She didn't care. Later, after Weston had fallen asleep in the backseat and the last of the folding tables had been stowed away, Nolan carried him inside while Maribel turned off the lights. They settled on the couch with a blanket and a glass of wine, one of the few bottles she'd kept when she sold her city penthouse. "I used to think love had to be complicated," she whispered, "and now, Now I know it can be simple. And still be everything. He lifted her hand and kissed the inside of her wrist. You've got a forever kind of heart, Maribel. And you, she said, curling into him, are the only one who ever looked deep enough to find it. They fell asleep like that, tangled on the couch, the house quiet around them, the night breeze stirring the curtains. 1 year later, in the backyard of their home, they exchanged vows beneath a canopy of string lights and late summer stars. Nolan wore a charcoal suit and a smile that didn't leave his face all night. Maribel walked barefoot down the aisle, her dress simple and elegant, her hand clasped firmly in Weston's as he gave her away. The vows were short, but there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. I didn't expect you, Nolan had said, but I see you. And I love what I see. And I didn't come here looking for love, Maribel had replied. But I found it in a garage, in a boy with dragon dreams, in a man who never needed to impress me. After the cake was cut and the music started, Weston fell asleep in a hammock in the corner of the yard, still wearing his flower crown and holding half a cupcake. Nolan picked him up and carried him inside, then returned to the dance floor where Maribel waited, her arms open, her eyes full of light. They danced under the stars until the music faded. And as the night drew to a close and their guests trickled away, Nolan pulled Maribel close and whispered against her ear. You brought the whole world into my arms, she smiled, resting her head on his chest. You gave me a reason to stay, and together they did. Forever.